This is the new BSA Bantam 350, and in today's video we're going to tell you how this bike compares to some of its competitors like this Honda GB350 and the Royal Enfield Hunter.
Lovely spot we've chosen here today. Now we're going to start with the Royal Enfield Hunter 350, which is the one bike we don't have with us here today, but we do have extensive experience of riding the Hunter. The one thing that separates the Royal Enfield Hunter from these two is its dimensions. Now you've got very steep forks on the Hunter, which gives it very darty, very quick steering, which is great in the cities but less stable on the open roads. And it's got a shorter wheelbase and it's a smaller bike. So from that point of view, we kind of want to sort of eliminate it from this discussion early because of that. Just going to knock the helmet off. But not because it's worse or better, it's just different. Now these two are more comparable, I think. In terms of the engine on the Royal Enfield Hunter, it's a wonderful engine, that little 350. It's beautiful, it does everything so well. It's got no weak points or no flat spots. It just pulls nicely throughout the rev range. It tops out at about 60 miles an hour, so to squeeze more speed out of it is a bit difficult, whereas these two are a little bit faster, especially the Bantam. So as I said, we're going to eliminate the Hunter from now on, but I would consider that bike if you want a good city bike, something that handles very sharply, and you want something with smaller dimensions. So if you're not as tall as we are, maybe the Hunter might be the one to start with.
Now if you're watching this and you're not yet subscribed, make sure you hit the subscribe button so you don't miss out on our upcoming videos comparing the BSA Scrambler to the Royal Enfield Bear 650, and we're going to be taking this Bantam and a Royal Enfield Classic 350 into a town and asking the young people which they prefer the styling of, because manufacturers, from what we've heard, think that they need to make the modern classics slightly on the more modern side to appeal to the younger new riders. So we want to find out whether that is actually the case or whether they prefer a more fully classic style. So make sure you subscribe to find out the answer. I think it's going to be an interesting video. Now the most notable thing to start with is the engines. Now this BSA Bantam has a 350 liquid cooled motor, whereas the GB350 is air cooled, which gives you a very different character, which I'll come on to in a minute. But this new BSA produces 29 horsepower at 7,750 RPM, making it the most powerful 350cc in its category. Now compared to the Honda, that's 20.8 horsepower at 5,500 RPM. So the peak power is lower in the RPM range over the BSA, and you do feel like you need to rev this bike more. But the main difference that you feel between these two engines is the torque. Whilst it's a similar peak figure, this being 29.6 Newton meters on the Bantam and 29 Newton meters on the GB350, they peak at very different points in the RPM range. The Honda peaking at 3,000 RPM and the Bantam peaking at 6,000 RPM. So the torque comes in, or peaks, much lower in the RPM range on the Honda, and you do feel that. You feel the torque right from the get-go, whereas this bike needs to be revved a little bit more. So you find the first few thousand RPM, you don't feel much, and then it starts to take off. Whereas the Honda is probably a little bit more smooth in its power delivery from the get-go.
Now, one of the things you do feel the difference with when you get from one of these to the other is that because you have to give the BSA more revs to move away, it's easier to stall, so you've got to give it some, whereas the Honda, you can just dump the clutch and it will go off perfectly all right. Also, if you're moving along and you put it in the wrong gear, you're in a high gear, say you're in third gear where you should be in first, the Honda doesn't complain. That does. It really does need to get high up in the rev range. But when it is in the rev range, that's a beast. It flies. This is more leisurely, if you like.
the GB350 being air-cooled has got a lovely character, and I do prefer the character of an air-cooled engine over a liquid-cooled one. You've got that lovely traditional single-cylinder thumpiness, which is just addictive. It really is, and this exhaust provides a lovely deep tone. So it's lovely to play around with this bike at low RPMs. It's a very satisfying feeling, and you don't feel like this bike encourages you to go quickly. It's very much a relaxed ride, and it encourages you to ride it slowly, change gear, low in the RPM, ride it within the torque, and just hear that lovely exhaust note. Whereas the BSA is a completely different character. This one encourages you to rev it, and when you do get a nice feel to this bike and a nice sound out of the exhaust, but you have to be higher up in the RPM range to get that. Low down, it's not as satisfying. This bike also has some nice pops and burbles on the overrun. Once it's warmed up, you find that when you've been pushing it a bit, you come to a stop and it goes pop, 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 pop. So they've got a completely different character, but each one has its benefits.
Now the Honda has 5 gears, and when you get to 5th gear, unless you're on a bit of a downhill or with a bit of backwind, it doesn't pull that gear. It'll just about sustain it in some situations. In other situations it starts slowing down. It hasn't quite got the power or the torque, or I don't know what, the tuning to pull that gear very strongly. Whereas on the BSA, if you get into 6th gear, it still accelerates through the entire gear, and the top speed of this is much faster. I've done 75 on this, ran out of space. I would say it would do 80 quite easily, maybe even slightly more. On this, 70 is manageable, so both bikes will be fine on the motorway, whereas the Royal Enfields, perhaps, as I said earlier on, you know, it tops out at 60 and you can squeeze a bit more, but not particularly good on the motorway.
So front to back on each of these motorcycles, the BSA, you've got a nice shaped mudguard, and I quite like the bracket that's on this. Similar size on the Honda, both could do with being slightly bigger. Lovely styled wheels on both of these bikes. The Honda would be slightly easier to clean because there's not so much narrow bits to get your hands in, whereas this BSA, you've got quite a narrow bit there, so you need a special brush to get in there. But very nice styling. The front disc brake on each of these bikes, both are good, but I think the BSA is slightly better stopping power. It really does stop very, very well. It's very confidence inspiring. Both bikes have got a lovely round traditional style headlamp, but they're LED. This has got a digital dial, whereas the Honda has got an analog. Traditionally we prefer analog, but I do like the lovely round shape of this BSA dial. It can be a little bit hard to read the RPM on this, especially if the sun's really shining down on the speedometer, but it's very nice, and it's in the centre, which is fantastic. It's slightly offset on the GB350. Well, technically, because it's got this side bit, it is in the middle overall, but the actual bit that you read isn't. So I would sort of maybe make that a little bit more condensed and a smaller package if I'm nitpicking, which I am. Both bikes have got nice bars. Perhaps they're slightly wider on the BSA. Good visibility from both. Very similar styled petrol tanks on both bikes. Both are beautiful, so I cannot fault either of them there. Fantastic. In terms of looks of the engine, they're both good looking engines. It's hard to pick between the two, but for me, perhaps, I think I prefer the look of the Honda engine, mainly because I like the way the Honda is angled. It's nice and upright, and because it's air cooled, you can see through the frame, and you haven't got a radiator at the front, and you've got a fan at the front here as well, which does add a little bit of bulkiness to the bike, but they've designed it pretty well. We did notice in London that we could really hear the fans on the Bantam, whereas in the countryside I haven't really heard it. So maybe it was too hot riding around the streets of London.
I had it going.
You heard it going. Okay, so you can still hear it, but I didn't think it was as loud. I don't know, did you?
Not as much.
Not as much, yeah. So maybe if you're going along stop-start 20 miles an hour like you have to in London now, 20 miles an hour everywhere, then the engine's going to get a little bit hotter than it would if you're going around these lovely country lanes at 40, 50 miles an hour. But both are good looking. The exhaust is similarly styled. I mean, take your pick, they both look nice. The foot pegs on the Bantam are perhaps slightly further forward than they are on the Honda, which gives a different riding position, which we'll go on to in a minute. Both have got nice seats, but this is a sort of flatter bench seat, so you can position yourself a little bit easier when the seat isn't as curved, but that's a lovely seat on the Honda as well.
Coming onto the rear end here with this mudguard, as we said when we originally saw the bike, you've got a sort of a short and stubby mudguard, and then because it doesn't come to the back of the wheel, by law you have to have the number plate as the furthest back thing behind the wheel, you have to stick this afterthought of a plastic thing on the back. So it would be much more sensible and better looking if the mudguard just came round and you stick the number plate on top of that. Coming to the Honda, not quite as bad in terms of the sticky on bit, but the rear mudguard is sort of tapered, so on a wet day it's still going to get a splashback as the wheel spins, and it will go all over your back. So in both cases the mudguard is designed more for aesthetics than function, and also in our opinion a classic mudguard is aesthetically more beautiful as well. Now coming on to the Bantam 350, I love the riding position. Your feet are further forward than they are on the Honda, and it feels like quite a big bike, and the handlebars are nice and wide. There's not much pullback. It's a lovely riding position, and because of the rake of the forks, it's quite a long wheelbase, and you can see the wheel way out in front of you. When you sit on the Hunter, it feels like the wheel's sort of there. It's very steep. So I like the handling on this. It's very stable at high speed, and the controls feel in the right place, so it's a very comfortable motorcycle. Moving on to the Honda, I'm still the same height, and it definitely feels a little bit more compact. My foot is further back than it is on the Bantam, so it's more of a sporty riding position, and the wheel's not so far in front of me because the forks are a little steeper. But both bikes have a rake, that's the steering head angle, that is not as steep as a lot of bikes have become, because there's a trend for a lot of motorcycles to get steeper and steeper and steeper every year, and you get these very twitchy, darty motorbikes. Both of these got a lovely handling characteristics. In the traffic, and I was weaving about on the Honda, I started out on the Honda today, I thought it handles so beautifully. It really does carve up beautifully. You can do whatever you like on it, and it's not going to topple over, so it's a wonderful bike. And this similar way, not perhaps quite as darty as that one, but very, very stable with those forks sticking out like that. So at high speed, this is not a wobbler at all. It's very, very planted.
Okay, so one thing we get asked to test out, which sometimes we forget, is the pillion comfort. So we are going to demonstrate that with two oversized apes on the back. That's pretty comfortable. That's plenty of padding. It's a little bit firm, but you wouldn't want to go far on a 350 as a pillion, perhaps. And if you did, you could get a touring seat, I suppose. But I'd be more than happy to ride half an hour, hour's ride on the back of this. Yeah, comfortable, nice position for your legs. So, what's the BSA like? I like that. On the BSA, you've got this sort of rear heel peg and a foot peg. So I suppose partially that's so that you don't burn your back of your boot on the exhaust there. But that's nice and comfortable. It almost gives you the feeling of a foot plate. Perhaps the seat for the pillion is slightly more padded on the BSA. I feel a bit lower down, so I can't see as much over the head of the rider in front, but perfectly comfortable.
Yeah, I've got a heel on that one, on the exhaust.
Oh, on that side, yeah.
Now, when we first did the BSA video at the launch a few weeks ago, a lot of the comments were very much saying that there's nothing like a Bantam of old, and a lot of older chaps, I guess, who know the BSAs of old were critical. And you know, all motorcycles today are similar to each other. You know, it would be lovely if any manufacturer could just look at an old bike and say, make that again, because they are so perfect. But you've just kind of got to think of it as like, this is a new bike. It shares the name of an old bike, but it's like, you know, a Ford Capri now is nothing like the original Capri. Ford Mustang, there's a sort of people carrier type of car called a Mustang now, isn't there? Mach-E. I mean, so everyone does it. So I think you've got to get that out of your head, because it's just, look at it as a brand new motorcycle from 2025 and judge it how it is, and it's a great bike. But one thing that you do notice on all new bikes compared to old classic bikes is they're very chunky. So all bikes have become very big, very wide, very chunky, and much heavier than bikes of old. Because if you look at an old classic bike, they're lovely and narrow. You know, you look at the back profile, they're like that, you know. So things have evolved, the same as cars, isn't it? You look at a Mini, an old Mini is a tiny little car, and a new Mini is enormous. It's, you know, a different world. So that's just the way things are, I guess. So, but it would be kind of nice if a manufacturer could say, let's go back to our old range of bikes and see what's in front of them and just build it again, but, you know, with new technology. So what do you think on that?
So the last thing I think to mention with these two bikes is that the GB350 has got a centre stand and the Bantam doesn't. So sometimes people say that's a deal breaker for them. So whether that's something that's a deal breaker for you, it's purely up to your preference, but it's nice to have a centre stand. How much money is on the road charges for a motorbike in the UK? So if price is the deciding factor, the Royal Enfield Hunter is £3,899 starting price. The GB350 is £3,999, so it's the most expensive out of those three. And the Bantam is the cheapest at £3,500, but that's plus on the road charges, which I can't seem to find how much those are. So unless you speak to a dealer and you're going to buy one of these, they'll probably tell you, but I still think that makes it the cheapest, only just below the Hunter. So this is the cheapest option, and I think all of these bikes represent serious value for money. They all give you a hell of a lot for the price. So it's up to you really what you think is the best value for money, but there's not a huge amount in it. Now coming on to the back end, I like the back end of this bike. Right. Ready? Oh no, I've lost it now. Ready? You feel me? Coming onto the back end. Oh no. Right, ready? Now, in terms... I can't... Huh? Yeah, you do that bit.